So then what did white people create? They created whiteness. Now let me explain that, because that might seem odd to you for me to say that white people created whiteness. And that's the thing that has been harmful to black people and to people of color and around the globe for hundreds of years. The formation, the creation, and the notion of whiteness, not blackness. So in 1676, for the very first time, the elite English, who previously despised the Irish and other poor white people, said to the people that were white, indentured servants, hey, listen, you're better than the rest of those. You're better than the Africans. You're better than the Native Americans because you're white. And because you're white, we're going to give you more privileges. We will go ahead and make sure that once you finish your indenture, you will get some land, even though ultimately they gave them the least desirable land. But they did give them some land. But more significantly, they gave them the right to control and to manage and to supervise and to dominate people of African descent.
I don't hold the door open for white people anymore, and I think you should start doing the same thing. Even if it's just to test the data. Watch how they react. It is insanity. Also, do not say thank you when they open the door for me, because I'm not going to thank you. I don't need you.
We're going to talk about whiteness in a way that I haven't heard it in a lot of other places, but this is what went wrong. Like, if you ever wanted to know what went wrong, like, this is what went wrong. Like, what? Like, you ever looked at them and, wondered how they all made these crazy decisions? This is how it happened. Okay? Like, the betrayal was against memory itself. So, it didn't start with slavery or colonization. Those were actually symptoms of a greater issue. It began when white identity was constructed by erasing rootedness. European tribes, like the Irish, the Scots, the Germans, the Norse, they did have indigenous ways of living, right? Of being. Seasonal living, oral storytelling, grief rituals, communal economies. When empire logic, Rome, Catholic Church, feudalism, consolidated power in Europe, it forced those people to forget their rootedness and to replace memory with domination. The root was severed, survival through control. They didn't metabolize anything, not connection, right? Just control again. This was the first recursion. This is when they turned in on themselves, right? The first rise of this unprocessed entropy inside whiteness. It's rootless survival. It's identity by domination. It's memory replaced by mythic supremacy. And then that's how you end up with expansion without metabolization. So when Europeans came to the New World, they didn't arrive whole, right? They arrived already severed, already looping. They didn't integrate the grief of losing old Europe. They exported it. They didn't mourn their exile from memory. They externalized it on the people they colonized. Conquest wasn't just greed, it was spiritual panic. Because if you're not rooted in memory, you only feel alive by expanding your domination, by making more land, more wealth, more slaves, more laws, more mirrors, and thus their entropy, their unprocessed experiences exploded. But it was coded as civilization. So when American identity was built, it wasn't metabolized selfhood. It was built on dumping these unprocessed experiences, these entropy onto others. So indigenous people got labeled uncivilized to offload their own severed ancestral memory, right? Black people were property to offload their terror of being spiritually homeless because they felt spiritually homeless. Immigrants were treated like threats to offload their fear of being spiritually replaceable. Projection became policy. Projection became culture. Projection became destiny. America never healed from Europe. It just renamed its wounds. So every genocide, right? Every stolen plantation, every gentrified city, every new suburb, every Wall Street boom, every school built on erasure, every church built without confession is material success reinforced. It is material success reinforced spiritual entropy. It is material success reinforcing, right, spiritual unprocessed experiences for them. So the more whiteness succeeded externally, the more it hollowed out internally. So their collective brokenness rose because every reward for survival was tied to a denial of memory, right? The maw grew, the silence deepened, the performance sharpened. So here's just the facts, right? It was really a bit of a 4-stage process. Severance from ancestral rootedness, loss of metabolized memory, survival through domination, entropy weaponizes progress, projection on the others, externalization of internal panic, and reinforcement through wealth. So that it looped, got hardened in the culture. So white America's original sin is not slavery. It's the refusal to mourn the first loss of rootedness. So this is all just a disgusting projection. It's really this humiliating. Like I want people to sit with that. Like, we're watching them grieve in public. All of this is grief. All of it. Rape, slavery, genocide, imperialism. Those were the fevered dreams of a people trying not to remember what it felt like to be abandoned by their own history. So every time memory tried to return, they doubled the performance instead of softening. This is why black people look so nasty to them. Because if we can build a culture, even in the midst of that, of exile, it makes all of this grief look meaningless. It has to be destroyed in that way, right? So they have no home. You ask a black person where it all starts from. You might say you might get answers like slavery in Africa. You ask a white person, you'll hear Europe. Okay, but you hear exactly the same. Africa, Europe, they're as disconnected, if not worse, and they've been materially rewarded for it through this reinforcement. So this was a crazy deep take, but this is exactly what's going on, for sure.
Child, when some of y'all hear the word whiteness, you think I'm talking about white folks. And some white folks get defensive. So let me break it down real quick. Whiteness is not skin. It's not melanin levels. It's an ideology, a way of thinking, a system, a power structure. And it was created on purpose. In colonial America, especially in places like Virginia, lawmakers literally created racial categories to divide poor Europeans from enslaved Africans. Now, after Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, there was a time when poor white folks and black folks got together. They united against the wealthy elite. And baby, when the wealthy elite saw this, they was like, we got to do something about that. So what did they do? They hardened the racial lines. They gave poor Europeans small privileges, and I do mean small, and invented a thing called white as a political identity. And it was in that moment that whiteness became the standard, the default, the norm. So this thing has been going on a long time. If you look like it, talk like it, align with it, you're closer to safety, or so you think. If you don't, you're suspect. That's why professionalism looks one way. That's why neighborhoods were redlined. That's why school districts still reflect segregated patterns to this day. And here's the kicker. You don't have to be white to align with whiteness. Whiteness harms everybody. It doesn't just harm black folks. And here's the lie that whiteness tells you. It ties human worth to dominance. It teaches children their identity is rooted in superiority. And it teaches everyone else that proximity to that standard equals value. And when we critique whiteness, we're not necessarily attacking white people. We are naming an ideology that organizes that power. And baby, if your identity feels threatened when that system is questioned, that's not hate or oppression. That's about your attachment to the hierarchy. Dismantling hierarchy frees everyone. The tragedy is those who benefit from it think they're winning. And they're not. You can't win in a system that thinks it's normal to step on someone else's neck. You can't. You can't. All right, good people. Drink your water. Stay rooted, real, and knowledgeable. And mind your black business. Happy Black History 365. And I'll see you next time.
This is a fundamentally racist question. Whiteness and blackness are not at all two sides of the same coin. One is an ideology that was created as a way to oppress others, and it's led to the exploitation and enslavement of countless peoples, whereas blackness is a relatively new phenomenon that has emerged in response to oppression. If you do a little bit of research or ask people in the black community what blackness is, what they describe is a sense of culture and community that they share amongst each other. And so there are things that are culturally black. They serve as a way to bond people to each other. Whereas culturally white things are like conquest, violence, and using weaponry and manpower to subject other people. It's about subjugation. It's not about community. And so that's why even asking, oh, why don't you talk down on blackness? The very question itself is implying that whiteness and blackness are the same when they aren't. You are simply wanting me to post about how I don't like black people. That's what you're asking me to do by sending me this direct message. I am not going to do that because it's fucking stupid, and racism as a concept is stupid. My entire content is about combating people like you. Bye.
This could cost me followers, and if it does, I'm okay, because I know I've lost the right ones. In 2024, if you don't understand that white privilege doesn't equal financial privilege, there's a good chance it's because you choose to be willfully ignorant. White privilege doesn't mean that you grew up rich or that you didn't have a hard life. It's the concept that by the mere coincidence of you being born white or white presenting, that you have an inherent privilege. You're afforded certain benefits of the doubt that not everyone gets. It's the difference from a white person walking into a store and a customer salesperson walking up and saying, "Hi, can we help you find something today?" To a black person walking in that same store with that same customer service person following them around because they looked kind of suspicious. It's the black family that can't leave their family photos hanging on the wall when they're selling their house because the home appraiser might undervalue their house by as much as $500,000. And for fuck's sakes, you've never had to apologize for being white. Had your parents fucked on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday, you wouldn't even be you. Rather, just acknowledge that the system that was designed by and for people that look like you has never been a level playing field. I hope this made it clear. Have a great fucking weekend.
Racism devastates people from the global majority the most. Obviously, let's be really clear about that. But whiteness carries a cost for white people too. And I wish white people could get that into their heads. It shows up in how isolated we often are. In regions like the Northeast and Wales, over 90% of people are white British, and a third of white Britons say they have no friends from a global majority background. I mean, think about what that means. We are cut off from whole worlds of perspective, from different ways of thinking, problem solving, creativity, ideas, joy, humor, you name it. Instead of gaining resilience through difference, we stay small and we stay shallow and we cling to sameness, and I guess we call that normal. Whiteness looks like power, but it's really a cage. It cuts us off from the richness of life itself. Racism dehumanizes people of color, but it also diminishes white people. And anti-racism isn't charity work, remember. It's how we open the door to fuller humanity, connection, and possibility. I mean, it would be great if we did this out of the goodness of our hearts and for the sake of justice. But if that feels like too much to ask, do it for selfish reasons. Do it because your life will be richer, deeper, funnier, and better if you do.
You know, for as bad as the world seems right now, the United States, how out of control it is, how little power it seems that we have, the little bit of constitutional rights that we have are being violated, and you know, pretty much just we're being pinned against the ground, backs against the wall. It is such a blessing. I was just listening to Deontay Kyle's fucking podcast, and he was talking about just like the history of white privilege in this country, how they've run absolutely everything, and it is everything. And this is the fall of that system. Like, it's gonna get ugly. It's gonna get ugly before it ever gets pretty, but it'll burn down to the ground before we ever continue to live in this shit. And I know that because there is enough brown folk, melanated folk, native peoples of the world in this country to overtake that white supremacy. They're fighting. This is the last straw. They're trying to keep this control, but it's too far gone. This is the natural karma of the world, and I know it feels shitty. Trust me, I have a 3-year-old and I have a child on the way, and it's scary to think they're gonna have to grow up in this shit and the violence that comes behind this. But I also know that this is the last time that this battle is going to have to be fought, because there's a new world coming. They controlled everything. The world is crashing for a new world to be born, built, and lived in. And I know that shit to be true. Even if we don't get to actually live in it, I believe that this is a process of a new world truly being built, where people could live heaven on earth. They don't gotta go through this bullshit. White supremacy, white whiteness, white control of the world is going down. And it's not just in the United States, it's in the whole world. This is nature. This is just laws coming into play. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for all the pieces of shit who are helping crash the system right now.
Been seeing a lot of posts about whether or not you should connect to your ancestors if you are of a European lineage. And I think the short answer is yes. And I think the reason why people aren't or don't want to is because they're ashamed. They're ashamed of whatever their ancestors did to participate in systems of oppression. But the thing is that people of European ancestry were also oppressed. They just submitted to it, and that is the curse of whiteness. So whiteness is something that exists in our society and basically is this covenant that you entered into as a European immigrant, or your ancestors entered into. You came, you said, okay, I will go along, get along, and I will just give up all my ancestral identity to just be white. So most people with white ancestry, their ancestors didn't come here to try and oppress people. That was not their goal. Their goal was to survive. Did they oppress people when they did that? Yeah. Did they contribute to the annihilation of Native Americans? Yes. Did they contribute to slave systems? Yes. But they were thinking on a micro level about survival. And the price that they paid was to erase their own cultural history. So the white immigrants that came here first were the Puritans from the UK, and that kind of became the measure of whiteness that all immigrants that came after had to live up to. And if you want a really good example of this, go watch the movie Gangs of New York. It talks about a lot of the tensions between these white groups where they have the natives, which are a bunch of people of British descent who have been in the colonies for a long time or been in the country for a long time, probably since colonization. And then you've got the Irish immigrants as well, who are seen as outsiders and outcasts. So that movie just really shows the tensions that existed for white immigrants and why they gave up their own cultural identities, why they became this amalgamation of whiteness, and why it's so hard for people with white ancestry to understand culture and to appreciate culture because they sacrificed it. They just said, okay, yeah, I'm Irish, whatever, but I don't know anything about the Celts or the Druids or whatever else, spiritual or cultural came from my people. So in order to be a part of the oppressive class, they gave up their own identity. And that is the curse of whiteness. It's that you have to sacrifice who you are, the lessons learned by your ancestors to be able to essentially survive. Yeah, you're part of the dominant, oppressive society, but a lot of these people today, they aren't really doing great. They're struggling too. And so, yes, if you have white ancestry, your ancestors did participate in systems of oppression. But a lot of them went through some gnarly shit as well. A lot of them learned lessons. And I think they can teach you what they learned. And they can also participate in healing what they contributed to if you call on them for guidance. That's just my opinion.